Research that resonates.
Schweizer has not been wrong on any of his years and years of reporting on the Bidens.
Investigations that matter.
If your last name wasn't Biden, do you think you would have been asked to be on the board of Burisma?
I don't know. Probably not. But that's, I don't think that there's a lot of things that would have happened in my life that if my last name wasn't Biden.
The only entities, the only people that would report on this, and Peter Schweizer, who deserves a Medal of Freedom, in my view.
This is The Drill Down with Peter Schweizer.
Hi, this is Peter Schweizer, and welcome to The Drill Down, where we relentlessly expose cronyism, corruption, and the abuse of power in Washington, D.C. The co-host of the program, of course, is Eric Eggers. Eric, I'm sure you've probably checked the calendar. It's October. It is baseball playoff time. It is close to the election. The leaves are starting to turn, and we have Halloween coming. So what are you dressing up as for Halloween?
Well, I've long told you to stay out of my personal life, especially on the podcast, and I'll now politely ask you to stay out of my closet as well. I have children, so I'm sure they'll go with some variety of Bluey and or some Yu-Gi-Oh or some weird Japanese animation thing that I think that's a guess for right now.
That would be very, very creative. And of course, we're showing our age. But the reason I asked is I wonder if any of them were dressing up as Smurfs. We're going to talk about Smurfs today and some other issues related to the election and election integrity, something you know a lot about. You wrote a book about it, but there are a lot of new developments we want to touch on today to let people know what we can expect in the chaos that is ahead of us.
Let me ask you, Peter Schweizer, why are there new developments? And then why are we talking about Smurfs and other threats to America's elections today as we enter October?
Well, we're doing it in part because GAI has a report that's going to be coming out on election risks. It's going to outline dozens of threats to our electoral system and also providing solutions. And the thing we have to keep in mind, you read these statistics to me earlier as to how close the last election was. So even something that can turn a couple thousand votes could change the outcome of the election. Those numbers were pretty astonishing you shared with me.
They were pretty astonishing. And before you are troubled by what I'm about to tell you, there's good news at the end. So what's troubling is the last election in 2020 was decided by essentially less than 50,000 votes that happened in 4 swing states.
Across the entire country.
Yeah, in 4 cities in these swing states. Yeah. And so, people raised concerns because overnight, the night of the election, in 4 cities, Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, and Milwaukee, we saw anywhere between 85,000 and 268,000 votes be added overnight to Joe Biden's campaign. And that, those 4 states happened to swing the election, and it was this sort of magical, mysterious infusion of votes that I think caused a lot of people to have very real concerns in a new way about the security of our American elections. Now, I say that seems quite troubling, right? That could happen, and there wasn't a lot of discussion about it. In fact, a lot of the discussion was censored through big tech and social media. The good news is that we now know that the 2020 election was the most secure and fair in American history. So while that seems concerning, the reality is that you're a rube.
Right. And look, and here's the thing. We're not suggesting, we don't subscribe to the view that this was a manipulation of the software, that this was some kind of hacking or the machines did this.
Can you say that one more time for the deposition, please?
Really, the reason I'm highlighting this is because there's so many other more basic ways that the electoral system can be manipulated. You wrote about it in your book, Fraud. We're going to talk about a little bit about that today. So it's a very complicated thing when you hold elections. They're decentralized. States and local governments are the ones that manage them. And yet, something that occurs in one city could have huge ramifications, but it's not just the counting of the ballots and of the votes that matters. It actually starts before then, actually in how our campaigns increasingly are being financed.
No, absolutely. So in this report that will be coming out this week, we talk about 50 threats to American elections. And one of the top threats, which I think is terrific for us to be able to discuss. It's less terrific for the country, but it's good for us to discuss because it's the merger of big money and big government. That's what we exist to explore here at the Government Accountability Institute.
Right.
You mentioned it, Smurfs.
Yeah.
Now, we know Smurfs as these animated, small, blue creatures. You got Gargamel. I'm a big Smurfs fan.
You know some of the names.
Gargamel's the villain, bro.
Oh.
Yeah.
I have no clue.
No,
I was never into this.
You know what? I believe you.
I was a He-Man guy. You can be the Smurf guy.
I hate that for you. But Smurfs is actually not a childlike thing. I mean, it is in the cartoon. But as it relates to American elections, it's actually quite dangerous.
Yeah, it is. And I'm actually kind of curious how it got its name. I don't know if you know the answer to that. But what it relates to is taking donations, large donations, and breaking them up into a series of smaller donations to mask that they are actually large donations. That's the allegation here, right? And it's happening through these online portals like Act Blue, for example.
So
That's the one
my
on the
bet
left.
is that the fact that it's called Act Blue and we have small donations coming in through Act Blue.
And they're blue. The Smurfs are blue.
Is where the Smurfs name comes from, if I had to guess.
That's a very good call. That's a very good call. I like that.
Thank you.
And
But it's to be clear, Smurfing is a money laundering technique.
Correct.
Right? It's identity theft.
Yeah.
And it's a money laundering technique. And it's actually something that we identified as a vulnerability in American elections and in terms of funding American elections. Back in 2012, one of the first things we did as the Government Accountability Institute was founded was a report on something called Obama.com that essentially highlighted how foreign money could be entering American campaigns, which is a violation of the law because credit card companies on these portals like Act Blue don't require credit card verification like those 3 or 4 digits that you would have to do for almost any other transaction.
That's right. If you want to buy a pair of socks on Amazon, you have to give that security code on the back of the credit card. Obama.com did not require it, and the vast majority of political campaigns, Republican and Democrat, don't require it either. And what they argue is, well, it's an ease of use thing, right? We don't want people to have to do the code. We just want them to make the donation. We want to make it as simple as possible. The problem is, this is where the smurfing and the allegations of these illegal donations being made through these portals is if you don't have that security system on, you're not actually matching the credit card number, or you can use a gift card, right? You could get a $1,000 gift card and break up a bunch of donations. You don't actually know if that credit card corresponds to the person who you are saying is making the donation. In other words, I could take your credit card number, not even have the security code because they don't require it, and I could put donations in my name or in our producer's name, give it to a bunch of different candidates in small amounts, so it's very hard to trace. And nobody knows the source of that money that it actually came from your credit card.
So why does that matter? Like, why is that a big deal that this is happening?
Yeah, so one of the things we want in money in politics is transparency. And the Federal Election Commission has these rules. Now, these rules were written in the 1970s. Hello, there was no internet. There was no online donations. There were very few credit card donations. A lot of it was passing the hat or people writing checks. And those requirements said that donations over $200, you had to verify and you had to disclose. Those under $200, you did not. What's happened now in the era of the internet is that if I want to make a $10,000 donation to your campaign, Eric Eggers, you're running for the Senate in the state of Florida. Well, I can't donate $10,000 to your campaign.
It's a violation.
Yeah, it's capped at, I think, $2,900 in the primary and $2,900 in the election campaign, so like $5,800. But I want to give $10,000. So what do? I just send a bunch of donations for under $200 and I put them in other people's names. And we're going to go through some of the statistics in a minute, but there are some eye-popping instances of little old ladies who are on pensions or on Social Security that are listed as having given, $300,000 in donations to various candidates. And when they are actually confronted by journalists or asked by journalists, did you make these donations? They say, I have no idea what you're talking about. So this is a way where large dollar donors can mask that they are the origins of the money. They can violate election laws. And the problem is Act Blue or Win Red, which is the Republican version of it, they don't really care because the donations are going through. They get a 3% credit card fee. The campaigns don't care because they're collecting their money. And the Federal Election Commission says, well, this doesn't necessarily violate any law that we can enforce because there's no credit card security requirements placed.
Put another way, there's basically no incentive against this happening.
For anybody.
Because even the person who's having their identity taken, it doesn't cost them any money. It's just their name shows up on a spreadsheet for an extended period of time. And so because there's essentially no incentive against it, it's skyrocketing in terms of its prevalence. We talked about Obama.com report came out in 2012. This is a problem and a trend that we noted was happening. Since then, it has steadily increased with virtually zero cases of it happening in 2014, to now what some estimates are saying is as many as 2% of all political donations in 2022 are fraudulent via this smurfing mechanism. Put another way, 43% of the donations that happened in 2022, according to one analysis, may have come from suspected Smurfs at a value of potentially $1 billion in terms of just money that went into campaigns.
Right. Exactly. So if you're a rich guy on either side of the aisle and you want to mask your donations, you don't want to be called out, or you want to give more than you're legally allowed to do, you can set up a systematic operation. And we've actually talked to a guy in Chicago who's a software engineer who said this is a very easy thing to do. Right? All you need to do is have a series of credit cards, and you can make these donations on these online portals in a repeated way. You can do, I'm going to do, $1,015 donations today. I'm going to do another 1,000 tomorrow. I'm going to do another 1,000 the day after that to accumulate the numbers, and nobody is paying attention.
Yeah, because there is no mechanism to sort of catch it. As you noted, everyone in the process makes money off of it. And so that's one of the reasons why this happens so prevalently. And it's, I think, a chronically underreported story in terms of what money in American elections looks like. So we, as part of this report on threats to American elections, obtained data of a lot of different individuals who have made more than $10,000 in donations each. And we've identified, I think, some people who we believe to be potential Smurfs. And other people have done this analysis. And when some citizen journalists have said, hey, and they've gone to these people, they find them like in Fernandina Beach, Florida and elsewhere. And they said, hey, according to the records, like you've donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to Act Blue, over a period of time. This one lady who was the wife of a guy named Heinz Friedrich, who was accused of doing this, his wife said he didn't do $300,000 worth of anything in 3 years. Which, respect for the candor, if not so much for Mr. Friedrich's personal economy. But and another one happened in Las Vegas. This lady, Elena Bulau, who's a devout Democrat, she's linked with 830 donations over $111,000. Had some very choice words for the citizen journalist when she was confronted, said that's, put another way, since it's a family podcast, not accurate. Yeah,
not accurate. And let's just put this in context now. So what is happening is on Act Blue, they are listing John Smith, whoever it is, and they're in some cases saying that these are people that are making thousands of individual donations in an election cycle, which is a 2-year period. And in some cases, 10,000 donations each, right? These individuals. So, but here's the thing. The system's not really automated. You can't go to Act Blue and say, take $10 from my account every single day and then do that for a bunch of candidates. You actually have to input and make the decision to donate. So think about that. Are there that many people that are actually sitting down in a non-automated way and making that many donations? It just doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. And that's where I think the suspicion lies, is why is somebody choosing to give 2,000 donations for $15 a piece rather than just, if they've got the money, write the big checks, legally to each one. It's the automated nature of it, it's the quantity of it, it's the systematic nature of it that makes it so suspicious.
If you think about it, I would say the biggest threat to our elections that our report identifies, and I think just exists generally, are things being done in the names of other people that we all have to basically be held accountable for, because the elections impact all of us.
Yeah.
So there's the money being donated via Act Blue, via Smurfs, on the names of other people. And then there's votes being cast potentially on behalf of other people. And so one of the other categories that we have in this report are, we talk about like non-citizen voting and voter ID laws. And there's been some interesting developments in different states that I think underscore the threats that these things pose. Now, you mentioned it's October, and people get excited for different things. I enjoy watching people pretend they like pumpkin flavoring and various things, right? Like all of a sudden,
you don't like pumpkin spice?
We're fine 11 months out of the year in October. Man, can I get some pumpkin candles around this mug? So
you're suggesting that Smurfing might be the pumpkin spice of American politics.
That's your phrase, not mine. But
everybody
I like
pretends they like it, but they know it's really not good.
But I do like, just as a philosophical thing, that we exist for these laboratories of democracy. Each state kind of gets to do their own thing. But what's fun is when the federal government tries to intervene and these different courts block the states from doing different things, and the way different states are reacting to different election threats, I think, is telling. So last month, the Alabama Secretary of State, Wes Allen, announced that he'd begun inactivating the voter registrations of over 3,000 people who'd previously been issued non-citizen ID numbers. So on the one hand, it kind of makes sense, like, hey, if you're a non-citizen, you probably shouldn't be registered to vote. So he starts, deactivating it. Well, guess who decided to step in?
The Biden administration.
The Department of Justice.
Yeah.
Because the federal law says you have to do that 90 days outside of a federal election. They started doing it 84 days outside of a federal election. And I think what's interesting is their quote is, "The right to vote is one of the most sacred rights in our democracy. As election day approaches, it's critical that Alabama redress voter confusion, resulting in this list maintenance mailings." But if you're
What's the confusion?
Right. Well, so in the analysis, they did find a couple of people they claimed to potentially not be non-citizens. And so this is the tension. This is why.
But why do they I don't understand why they have a non-citizen number if they are a citizen. It's just a clerical error?
I mean, potentially, right?
Okay.
But the point would be is that you found thousands of people that were on the voter rolls that were issued a non-citizen number. And that's one of, I think, the larger threats that we face in this country. Trump in 2016 claimed millions of non-citizens cast ballots, and that was based on some academic studies. And I know that you've done some research into this. And the reality is we don't have fewer illegal immigrants in this country than we did 4 years ago.
Right.
There are massive political get-out-the-vote operations, some of which are actually being conducted by the same federal government that let the people into the country. So I don't think it's a stretch to imagine that we might see an influx of people casting ballots who otherwise shouldn't be doing so legally, especially when some of the safeguards have been removed.
Well, and to your point earlier about the numbers, 3,000 in Alabama may not make a difference because it's generally a pretty red state, but 3,000 people that are foreign nationals that are voting in Georgia, that are voting in Pennsylvania, that are voting in Wisconsin or Michigan, could potentially swing the state. I mean, that's the point. So when you think about these problems and you think, oh, well, what's the big deal? It's, it may only be a few hundred people. That can make a huge difference. And that's why the fights on this, I think, are so vicious and the pushback is so strong from the Biden administration. They know it's going to be a close election. They think it's going to be one, and they want to make sure that they get every possible blue voter out there.
Republicans get criticized for defaulting on trying to, make elections so secure that it borders on voter suppression. But the opposite's clearly true for Democrats. Like California, just as an example, there's a lawsuit happening about this, and Gavin Newsom just signed a law. So Huntington Beach, California, it's a beautiful coastal area.
Orange County, I think.
Yeah, they said, hey, we want to make sure that our elections are secure. So back in March, the citizens approved an initiative by 53% that said that they're going to start implementing voter ID laws in local elections in 2026. So, hey, people say we were going to require voter ID. Shouldn't be a big deal. Well, Gavin Newsom has other thoughts on this. So they just passed a law, and he just signed into law something that says no local governing election can have, or no local municipality can require voter ID. So think about that. Like it's one thing to say we're going to require voter ID. California's gone the opposite way. They said, no. We're going to make it illegal to require voter ID.
Yeah. No, and it's remarkable. I mean, you've heard other people talk about it as well, but how many different services and ordinary things that you do in your life that requires an ID. I was just noticing the other day that Costco is cracking down on people walking in with a Costco card, waving it. They're actually now matching the photo to the person coming into the Costco. So it means it's easier to vote in a federal election in the United States, which requires no ID, than it is to actually go pick up something at a discount at Costco. And the list could be endless in the number of instances where this applies. And that's the inherent problem. The notion that there are all these ordinary Americans walking around that don't have an ID, can't get an ID, aren't able to, show one at the voting booth is just patently absurd.
The issue you're raising is legitimate. Unfortunately, you're the wrong person to raise it because I've seen you walk into Costco and not show an ID. Just hold up your book that is for sale at Costco. That's the picture on the back of the book, and like somehow you think that's going to be
it's author privilege
enough. The problem is you wear the blazer too. That's what I think particularly galling. So there's two other states that I think to underscore the issue of like how vulnerable these are and how they different. and what these states are doing about the threats to the security and accuracy of their election and what it might mean for November's results.
Yeah.
So North Carolina just recently announced that they've, over the last 20 months, and not been sued by the federal government because they started earlier. So Alabama took 3,000 people off. North Carolina has removed 747,000 people from its list of registered voters within the last 20 months. They said that the majority of these people, because they're deemed ineligible, they haven't voted in the last two elections because they're inactive, or they might be dead, they might be felons, they might have moved out of state. So North Carolina is taking the idea of voter roll accuracy seriously, and have been able to do so. And why I think that's a good thing is that's just less likelihood for bad actors. Just like you can make a political donation on behalf of somebody else, it's absolutely possible to cast a ballot on behalf of somebody else should you choose to do so. I tell the story, it's in my book. Undercover detectives in New York tested this out. They tried to cast 633 ballots on behalf of people who they shouldn't have been able to cast ballots on. 61 of the 63 times they were successful. So this is absolutely a thing political operatives know how to take advantage of, and good for North Carolina for trying to do something about it in a proactive way.
Yeah, no, that's right. And especially in an era where we are seeing more and more mail-in ballots, it makes it even a bigger problem, right? Because, they're mailing ballots out to people that aren't there anymore. I remember in 2020, there was a story in the Las Vegas News-Journal newspaper about they would go to these apartment buildings because, of course, people move in and out of apartments all the time. And there were stacks of mail-in ballots sitting by the boxes because the people were no longer there, just strewn on the ground. Anybody could have taken them, signed them, voted for somebody, and, based on the experience of those detectives, probably a lot of those ballots would have been counted.
And so that's actually a great point because Las Vegas is located in Nevada, and that's the other state we want to contrast with North Carolina. There's a multitude of lawsuits on behalf of the GOP in Nevada, 3 of which have been dismissed because they say they lack standing and they can't prove harm potentially moving forward. But among the issues being litigated so far unsuccessfully by the Republican Party is they say 5 of the counties in Nevada have their voter rolls exceeds the number of voting age adults, indicating the state is improperly maintaining voter rolls. You talked about that story from 2020. I remember a story in my book. A columnist wrote about how multiple illegal immigrants would tell him that, like Harry Reid and these labor unions, like they get activated and they go out and they ground everybody up, and they know where the vulnerabilities in the voter rolls are, and they're able to get the voters to take advantage of them.
Yeah.
Illegally, and this is not a new thing. So when we shifted to all mail-in ballots in 2020, as many states did, or mostly mail-in ballots, the vulnerabilities only increased, which is why, going back to where we started, when you see that massive influx of new votes overnight, you don't blame people for raising questions, and that's one of the reasons why I think we have this report out, because we want people to know ahead of the election just how vulnerable we are.
Yeah, well, we're going to keep watching this. We're going to watch the Smurfs, not on TV, but in American politics.
You can't name one Smurf.
No, they wore white hats.
What do you think they call the old Smurf?
Grampy?
Papa Smurf.
Papa Smurf. Okay, good.
What do you think they call the female Smurf?
I'm not sure I can say that on the podcast.
Smurfette.
Smurfette.
You dirty old man.
Smurfette. Smurfette. Okay, good. I learned something really new, but not necessarily useful today. But we're going to watch the Smurfing. We're going to watch the issues related to ballots. The report will be coming out shortly, so please look for that. And we're going to continue to monitor this. Eric wrote a terrific book in 2018 predicting a lot of what happened in 2020 and what is probably going to happen in 2024. That book is called Fraud. You can pick it up, of course, at Amazon or bookstores. So please get that if you want to be informed and be equipped. And we appreciate you, as always, taking the time to listen to us. We know your time is valuable. You can find out more about the research we're doing at thedrilldown.com. And, of course, you can subscribe to this podcast wherever fine podcasts are located. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.